You're live.
Cool. Kia ora everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm Katrina, Council's Group Manager for Strategy, Community and Democracy, and I'm joined tonight by Mayor Andy. Tonight we're talking local government reform, so amalgamation, Head Start pathway, everything about reform. It's a big topic, but we're going to try and answer as many of your questions as we can tonight. Thank you for everyone that sent in questions ahead of time. What we aim to do is go through what we know, what we don't know, and what's next. So, Andy, can you talk to us a little bit about how we got here?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for arranging this because it is a very big deal. It's the biggest change to local government since 1989, and it's important that we hear from people and people understand what's going on. So what happened was that the government has come out with some positions, and the last few weeks they've said, first of all, that regional councils won't continue to exist. Mayors will take over that function, and then they refined it and said at the same time we would like to see amalgamation of councils, so councils literally joining together, and they don't have to be next door to each other to do that, and to have a unitary authority. So they also said that they want to see proposals from councils, and everybody knows the number of councils that have been talking about amalgamation for some time. And they've said, we want to help, government wants to help, and we'd like to see those proposals in front of us in Wellington by the 9th of August.
Yeah, so when we're talking Head Start, Mayor Andy, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about councils getting in before the 9th of August with a proposal about how they might want to amalgamate.
Yeah, absolutely. And those conversations are live now. The tough part of that conversation is that government has come back and said, and if you don't submit by the 9th of August, we'll effectively do it to you without consultation with communities. And that would be a tragedy.
Yeah, and so that's what they're calling the backstop process, is if we don't go forward with a proposal by the 9th of August, we'll be put into this backstop process.
Yeah, absolutely. So the 9th of August is a critical time. So the reason that we're having this sort of conversation now and a number of public meetings are trying to understand exactly what our communities want. You know, we have next door neighbours that we could have conversations with, and we are. But more importantly, we want to know what our ratepayers say.
Yeah. So that's what we're doing now, isn't it, Andy? Talking to our communities about what their views are. One of the questions that they sent through was, if council does submit a proposal, does that mean amalgamation is going ahead?
Not necessarily. So we submit a proposal to Wellington, and they could say there's not enough information here, you're not clear enough in why you're doing it or what the benefits may be, and we will automatically refer to you to a backstop position.
Yeah. So that really is the question for council at the moment, isn't it? To put forward or to not put forward a proposal. What are the risks of putting forward a proposal now or waiting?
So if we wait and do nothing, then the risk is that the decisions will be made for us rather than by us. And so that's an incredible risk that I'm not prepared to take. I would far prefer to see our council have at least some sort of position, if not a full position available for amalgamation.
Yeah. And I guess the location of our district, Andy, if we were to amalgamate, we're talking about this conversation, who could our partners be?
Well, if you look across the Horizons region, so we have 7 councils. We have Palmerston and Wanganui and Tararua, Horowhenua, Manawatu, Ruapehu and ourselves. I think that's 7. If it's not, I'm missing one, I apologise to that council. Any one of those combinations is possible. You could even get the combination of all councils amalgamate within Horizons. That would make the new authority like a super city equivalent, controlling enormous land mass for New Zealand.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's lots of options, and that's one of the reasons why we're talking to our communities now. So what are the key things that we really want to hear from our communities?
if you put it in simple terms, what we want to hear from individual people and organisations is to say, if you were going to amalgamate, one, do you oppose amalgamation and you just want to fight that government position? Or two, if you want to amalgamate, is it with Wanganui going west, or is it east, or is it everybody in together? What's the best fit for you? And I guess we're asking people to think about where their water catchments are, what a unitary authority is, where they go to the doctor, all of those sorts of things, including where they shop and who they have relationships with.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of jargon in there, Andy. So do you want to talk to us more about what unitary authorities are?
Okay, so this started with regional councils being abolished or taken over by other councils. So a unitary council or authority is one that has the regional council functions, which include the discharges to the environment, maintenance of rivers, flood protection, all of those sorts of functions, along with the traditional authorities that we currently have in consenting and building and rates and so on.
Yeah. So quite a change, isn't it, Andy?
A huge change. So currently you receive two sets of rates. You have a council rate and you have a rate from Horizons. If there was a unitary authority and some sort of amalgamated group of councils, you'd receive one rate for those functions from the new authority.
Yeah. Talking about rates, that's obviously the question top of mind for many of our ratepayers is, will it be cheaper, is the question that they keep asking.
That's absolutely government's view. So they've said by amalgamating councils we'll reduce duplication, we will gain efficiency of scale and size, presumably there will be fewer people employed in the sector, therefore you must save money. And that's a view that they've had in central government as well by going to a super ministry and combining ministries. However, I guess the reality is also that the set-up costs of these new authorities are substantial and they will take time. Personally, I don't see the possibility of a cost saving, at least not in the short term.
Yeah, so what you're saying for our communities is that there could be efficiencies, but it's unlikely to make your rates instantly cheaper.
Certainly not instantly cheaper.
Yeah.
And there is a risk that it could be more expensive in the very, very short term.
Yeah. So talk to us about what the benefits might be of amalgamation.
The government has some solid points where you have different authorities with setting different rules. You'd get uniformity across a wider band of country. And potentially long term, you would save costs. And if you look at the amalgamation that happened in 1989, you'd have to say that it probably did save costs. However, internationally, all sorts of other countries have different views. So Switzerland, Germany and so on, they have an enormous number of councils and continue to operate efficiently.
Yeah.
But the very big downside is loss of public voice. So you imagine if all of our regional councils amalgamated and you have, for instance, one mayor, how does one mayor service from potentially Horowhenua to Ruapehu?
Yeah. And that's one of the questions we're asking at the moment is around what level of voice do you think is important?
Public voice has to be maintained in some shape or form. And whether there are community boards established to provide that function, but essentially what would happen with an amalgamated council is you'd have fewer decision-making points, opportunities for our district at a governance level.
Yeah. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. It's election year. What happened with that, Andy?
Yeah, so a number of people have said to me, when I've been talking to people about this, they've said, well, this isn't going to happen because we think that there'll be a change of government in October. I'm sorry, but the opposition parties have gone along with this. There was the opportunity in Parliament for this to be absolutely opposed in terms of process, and the time frame was too short. All of those things, and I haven't seen that happen. So this is a fast-track process of legislation that the other political parties seem to be okay with.
Yeah, they really haven't come out strongly with a position, have they? So there's a little bit of an unknown there.
Yeah, I think Labour's position is we'll wait until after the 9th of August and then form an opinion. However, the difficulty with that would be that we submit to Wellington and the submission goes to Wellington, it sits in Wellington for 6 weeks. Right on election time, they're not going to release anything and the decisions are made.
Yeah.
But remember, this isn't law yet.
Yes.
But it's proposed.
Tell us more about that in terms of the timeline for what the government's proposed. We've talked about the 9th of August being a key deadline for getting an outline proposal in. What will happen after that time?
So after that time clicks off, the Minister Simon Watts and Minister Bishop, who have been the architects of this, will say you've had your time, or potentially say you've had your time. You haven't put a position forward, so literally we will decide which councils should amalgamate with whom. So it's essentially a forced amalgamation process.
And if, say, council does decide to put a proposal in for the 9th of August, what's next? The government have said that there would be an opportunity for formal consultation on any finalised proposals.
Well, one of the unfortunate things about this process is we haven't seen the detail around that. So there's been detail lacking all the way through, and publicly I've been asked all sorts of questions around this. And I have to say, look, I'm sorry, we don't understand all of the things that are going on, and we wait for further clarification.
Yeah.
That's a very bad position to make a decision on.
So coming back to the community feedback period and what we're asking for at the moment, should residents still have a say if they don't have a firm view about amalgamation?
Yeah, they may have several different views. They may first of all say, we want you to fight this. This isn't what we're electing people for. We want our decisions to be made locally. And they could argue for that. They could argue that the unitary authority and the disestablishment of regional councils could be handled by some sort of CCO or a confederation of councils, which is a slightly different model but doesn't include amalgamation. Or they could say, well, actually, we put our hand up. We would like to amalgamate with 1 or 2 or more councils.
Yeah. So it's really important for everyone in the community to have their say, because this is a very significant discussion we're having, probably the most significant since 1989.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're urging people to have their say, to fill out forms, and we have these sorts of pamphlets going out where literally you can open them up and tick some boxes and tell us what you think.
Yeah.
So please, the plea is to do that and to look at the information we have on websites, etc.
Yeah, and you're holding some public meetings across the district as well. You had one last night up in Hunterville. So there's a few other opportunities for people to come and talk to yourself and staff and councillors in person. Yeah,
so we've already advertised on our websites. There'll be a number of public meetings, but I am open to any meeting with any person, group that we can possibly timetable.
Yeah.
And it's not only me, we've got a number of councillors around the table that would be available.
Yeah. And we've only got a few weeks to get it done. We've got a tight time frame.
10 weeks.
Tight time frame. So we've only got a few weeks for this consultation, but it is very easy to do online, in person. You might have seen it in the district monitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can go online and we can form an opinion, but the councils that we may wish to amalgamate, they may have a vastly different opinion. So it's like we can have a preferred relationship, but it takes 2 partners, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's the tricky space.
Yeah. Yeah, so that comes to the end of all of the questions that have been sent through prior. I do have some questions coming in that have been on the live. So, Your Worship, I'll give you the opportunity to say some final words before I dive into these live questions that we've received.
Yeah, let's deal with the questions first. And I welcome any more questions, of course.
Great, we've got two. So the first one is, how does that work with Three Waters, as we are already aligned with councils for that? So we're aligned with Palmerston North and Horowhenua for that. What if the amalgamation was with someone else, like Manawatu District Council?
Yeah, really good question whoever put this up, because it was a question that worried me. So we've had legal opinions, and the legal opinions say that the Three Water reform, or Central District's water, can stand alone. We can have a relationship with them to provide that function for our council. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we have a relationship with Manawatu as asked, or Wanganui, or any other partner.
Yeah. And Mayor Andy, there's going to be a lot of different aspects that is going to build into this decision about A, whether or not council's going to put in a proposal, or B, who that proposal might include. So there's going to be a lot of layers feeding into the decision and prioritisation as to what the best option is for our community, because at the end of the day, that's the key thing, is we're trying to find out what's best for our community, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's another one, and this is one that we've received a little bit of conflicting advice from the government on. So can the Rangitīkei be split in the proposal? So southern with MDC, northern with Ruapehu, for example.
Yeah, so I'll have people, for instance, whether it's Turakina or Turakina Beach or Ratana, etc., that are located close to Wanganui. And they may say, that's our preferred position. We go there for hospital services, we shop there, etc. Equally, on the other side of our district, they will say similar things around Manawatu. And I'll probably have a very small pocket in the very top of our district that says, well, it's neither, it's Hastings. So government has been reasonably clear to say that this is whole councils amalgamating with whole councils. So we can't, it's not a carve up, a representation review and those sorts of things. It is not a carve up of our district at this stage. Could that happen in the future? Potentially, yes.
Great, thank you, Mayor Andy. That looks like all of the live questions that's come through for us tonight. Now it's over to you for kind of final comments.
Well, let's not just close off too early, because I know that a whole lot of people are involved in this discussion at home and thinking, do I submit? So let's give them a minute or two with that. Absolutely, I want to see a position put forward by the 9th of August, and the chances of being fully developed are incredibly low. But at least we could say our district favours some sort of relationship with other councils, or we would like to stand alone but have the unitary authority performed by other things. The government has been very clear they want to see amalgamation, so they may override our decisions, but at least we're putting our thoughts on paper.
Yeah, and as you were talking, Mayor Andy, I've found a question that I missed in the initial the initial round of questioning.
Yep.
And this one's a really interesting one. So this one asked, how is a representation review, you might need to explain a representation review first, different from the government's proposed structural reform? So maybe start with telling us what a representation review is, how often we do it, and then we can talk about the differences from amalgamation.
Representation review within a district literally governs who will be sitting at the table. Now, how many councillors will you have? What's the form or structure of that? So we split our district up into central wards and northern wards and Maori wards and so on. So that's part of the representation process. But if you look at a number of councils joining together, let's get some idea of the scale of that. I don't think it is efficient for any council to operate with probably more than 15 councillors. It becomes just a nightmare logistically and so on.
Yeah. Remind our viewers how many councillors we've got in our council currently.
So we have 11.
Yep.
And they're spread right across our district. For those online that don't quite understand the Rangitīkei district scale, it's about 2.5 hours for me to drive from one end to the other. So we have northern ward councillors representing that sector of our community. and Southern Ward councillors down here. So any mega council, how do you get representation across those sections? And representation will probably be driven by a per capita formula. So you could form a council, for instance, with Palmerston North that has a far larger population than our own, and they say, well, we're the bigger council and we want 5 representatives at the table and you get 1.
Yeah, I guess, Andy, when we do our representation reviews, even as a district, we talk about fair and effective representation. So ratio of elected members to population is one of those considerations. Then the other consideration is around kind of those communities of interest, making sure there's right representation. And there's quite often rationale for having different ratios to members.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about fairness of decision.
Yeah.
So
okay, looks like
we've got more
a
questions coming.
few more
Great.
questions
Keep
as
them coming,
Andy's
guys.
been yapping away. So here's an interesting one. First one up. What are your thoughts on being forced to merge with an urban council like Palmerston North City Council and potentially lose our rural voice?
Another really great question, because Fed farmers, for instance, have a view that rural councils should amalgamate with other rural councils because they have a common lifestyle, they have a common set of problems, and the unitary authority would fit well within that. And so their view has been documented to say the metros shouldn't be part of that.
What's the flip side to that? So there's always a flip side.
Yeah, there's absolutely a flip side. So with a unitary authority or a regional council, it relies on a ratepayer base to be able to fund it. So if I look at our regional council, there's a fair majority of that funding that comes out of the metro sector.
Yeah.
That's the flip side. That's absolutely the downside to that proposal.
So it's a lot to balance up and weigh up.
Yeah, and you know, people will argue that urban councillors are focused on urban and they don't understand the rural sector at all. So that's the dilemma.
Yeah. The next one is a very direct question for you, Mayor Andy. So be prepared. The question is, do you favour amalgamation? If so or not, why not?
I think some degree of amalgamation is inevitable. However, a lot of that amalgamation can be formed by shared services and we currently do that. So we share services on things like roading. We have a shared service that comes out of this office in terms of animal rights and animal control. My preference would be to see those sorts of functions developed, and maybe a CCO or something that controls the unitary authority. I would love to see the identity of the Rangitīkei protected, but again the efficiencies by way of shared services where possible.
Yeah. And I guess a lot of your decision making and council's decision making is going to be made up by hearing what our community has to say and then what all those different layers and those weightings have as well. So there's a lot of information to come, isn't there?
There'll be a whole bunch of financial analysis that we should do for this sort of process, and the time frame doesn't permit it. You know, in 1989 and Auckland super amalgamation, it took 2 years, and 2 years minimum for those conversations to happen. 10 weeks just isn't sufficient.
Yeah.
So there was a second part, I think, to your question there that I might.
It was just the answer of why or why not. So I think you gave us this answer. Now this next question has you being a salesman, so prepare yourself for that. They've asked, what are our selling points for other councils? Why would they want to align with us?
If you look at the GDP of New Zealand, a huge amount of that GDP is driven out of our council. So the red meats, the dairy, the cropping and so on, we generate a huge amount of money, literally, for New Zealand Inc. We have space, and space is going to be in high demand. People are wanting to move out of Aucklands, they're wanting to move out of the metros, they're wanting a lifestyle of entertainment and so on. And each council has a function in there about making sure that there are parks and libraries and all of those functions that people live for.
Yeah.
So that's what we've
lots
got
on
to
offer
offer.
at the Rangitīkei. What about our location? That's a kind of very important one for us.
Yeah, we sit right smack in the middle of the North Island. So we have connections to our connection to Wellington, a couple of hours into Taupo. We have State Highway 1, rail, everything on our doorstep. And we have a lifestyle to die for.
Yeah. This is one that came up, you raised this last week in our council meeting in your plan deliberations, Mayor Andy. So the question is, if we amalgamate, will the council require a new building as planned?
I question whether we would. Literally, there's too many unknowns at this stage. So to me, it makes sense just to pause that process and say, let's understand the needs for our district. Let's understand if we amalgamate with somebody else, there will always be some provision of service from here, whether it's just purely administration, somewhere where you go and pay your rates or go to the library and organise parks and reserves, all that sort of localised function will continue to exist. So if we were amalgamated, we need to provide for that. So there will always be that function. However, if we amalgamated into a super city, will we need all of the space and all of the people that we currently have? Possibly not.
Yeah.
But let's take our time and get that right.
Yeah, so what council's effectively asked us to do as staff is to take a pause and to look at what the options are now that we've had this announcement come out.
Yeah, no council anticipated this, by the way.
Yeah.
No, none of this talk was on the table when we made our planning documents available.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
it's a new ballgame.
talk to us a bit more about this, Andy. How did it come out? It was a surprise to all of us.
Huge surprise, as I said earlier, and I don't want to spend a lot of time going back over things I said, but we were told that we would take over regional council functions as mayors. Then we were told that we'd be responsible for the reorganisation of that, and within the space of a week it changed to an amalgamation discussion.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was dropped on us.
Yeah. Questions rolling in now. One of them is about shared services. So you did talk about shared services. They've just asked about some shared services did come back in the house a couple of years ago.
Yes, we had a history of shared service with Manawatu. We still have relationships with Manawatu and things like dog control. This will be also sitting alongside the RMA reform. So the government has gone through a process of also saying with RMA reform and regional spatial plans, etc. So that was on their agenda already.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of those relationships, and of course we've now gone into relationship with Horowhenua and Palmerston North, which takes a whole chunk of our business away as well.
Yeah, you've segued very nicely to our next question, which is, it just says natural relationships with Palmerston North and Horowhenua District Council. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when you talk about amalgamation, I tend to think about amalgamation of functions rather than total amalgamation. And it made absolute sense in terms of efficiencies and scale for us to look at amalgamation of 3 water processes.
Yeah.
And I know that some councils, like some of our neighbouring councils, are saying, well, we're fine at the moment and we'll stand alone. I absolutely respect that. And if they're fine, that's a position they justify.
Yeah.
But it did make sense for us.
Yeah. Now we're jumping back into, this question's quite long, it's in a few parts, so I'll break it down. It's all about Māori wards. So the question is, could you please clarify what would happen to Māori wards if the Rangitīkei District Council amalgamated with a council that already has them? I wonder whether you start by talking about the poll that we had with the election and what the situation is with our Māori wards.
So we currently have Maori wards,
Yeah.
an inland and a coastal Maori ward. We went through the referendum process that was forced on us by government. All of our councillors had voted to retain Maori wards at the table. That was their preference. The referendum effectively overturned that, so we would lose our Maori wards for the next election, so they currently still continue to exist. If we amalgamated with another council, I'm not sure how that would fit. If essentially you have a whole new entity, it's like the super council that's just arrived, and it will need to set its own rules, and those rules will need to comply with government direction.
Yeah.
So the government has, even in the last few days, taken some stances around Maori wards and voting rights and all of those sorts of things. So there are all these parallel pieces of legislation that are in front of us and decisions made by government.
Yeah, and there's a lot of unknowns sitting in there, isn't there, Mayor Andy? There's not really a clear process of how all of that would work under the Head Start process or even the backstop process.
Absolutely. So that's the difficulty for us.
Yeah.
We're playing with a stacked card here that we don't know.
Yeah. The next one is, could we amalgamate with councils outside of our region?
Yeah, another great question, because the mayors, all of the mayors of New Zealand, especially rural and provincial mayors, have been meeting a lot in the last couple of weeks. And we ran around the room and said, first of all, how many mayors believe that should amalgamation of some form happen? And is the time frame achievable? Everybody said the time frame's unachievable. But we had one mayor, for instance, from the North Island that says our preferred position may be to amalgamate with the South Island Council. You could have communities of interest. You could have, for instance, a wine-producing region of New Zealand that says, well, actually, we'd like to amalgamate with the South Island wine-producing region because we see marketing opportunities and brand recognition. There are so many different permutations that could be put on the table here.
Yeah, and even locally, maybe talk to us about our own districts across two different regions, and the Horizons region actually has small chunks of quite a few other districts as well.
Yeah, the sort of follow-up to that would be look at Tararua, and you'd have to say Tararua has neighbours to the south and north of them, the other side of the ranges. But equally, they say, well, that's not a given. We affect Manawatu in terms of flooding. Our nearest shopping centres are probably Palms North City. So it's really hard to put a ruling on.
It's really complex, isn't it?
Yeah, there's iwi boundaries, there's catchment boundaries, there's hospital boundaries, there's so many different things.
Yeah.
And it's going to be sad if our council makes a decision and we've only got submissions from 40 or 50 people. And what representation is that?
Yeah, and that leads nicely to our next question. We talked about the poll that we had to do for Māori wards, but this question says it's been stated there should be a referendum on amalgamation. So should we be suggesting that and advocating that since we live in a democracy? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, who stated that there should be? Because the point is that government hasn't stated and they're controlling the rules of this game. So there's all sorts of people that can go out and say there should be a referendum, and that's great, but that's not the rules that we're currently operating under with this government.
Yeah.
Referendums are part of a wider consultation, and they can be either binding referendums or just referendums. And a binding referendum is literally the majority vote decides, in simple terms. But the key thing is that by people talking about referendums, they're essentially saying, we want a voice.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to establish with this process.
Yes, definitely. So that leads us to the end of our questions, potentially. There's no more that have flooded into my lap. I've got a large pile of papers, but potentially another question coming through from the back. While that gets collated, do you want to just remind everyone about the consultation that we're doing at the moment, this booklet that they'll see around, available on the website?
Yeah. What I'd urge is several things. First of all, be informed. Be informed as much as you can. Have your say. Listen to public meetings. Go onto our website. Look at all the information that's available there. Form an opinion. Talk to your friends and neighbours. Talk to your communities and say, what's your opinion? You know, and so there might be a group of people that get together and say, we've thought about this, you know, we've had coffee or a beer or something, and there's a dying question we want to ask. Flick them into us. We'll get it, even if we can't meet with you, and my preference is to meet, at least we'll get you an answer to your problem.
Yeah.
Or your question.
Yeah. And that leads on to the question that's come in, which is, should there be a referendum on amalgamations? And I guess I'll build on that question for you, Andy. If there was to be, what would the appropriate time frame for a referendum to be, given the process that we're in?
Certainly not 10 weeks. Absolutely not. A referendum is only as good also as the amount of information that's provided to the referendum for you to make a decision. So at the moment, we have no time to do a financial analysis. We have no time to consider the effects and all of those things that would normally be part of this process.
Yeah. So there's a lot more that we need to know. There's a lot more water to go under the bridge, and it's all going to happen very rapidly, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, maybe it's an opportunity for us to repeat this sort of process in the next couple of weeks and so on. And just continue to build on talking to people and giving the answers to the questions like this that are raised.
Yeah, and certainly on that, if anyone does have any more questions, we'll create a Q&A that we'll have updated on our website that you can go to ask your questions, get the answers, and make sure everyone has the information that they can have effectively, because there's lots we know, there's a whole lot we don't know, and it's a bit of a journey that we're on.
At the moment, it's an impossible journey, and we will talk to as many people as we can.
Yeah. Great. Well, if you're happy to wrap up, are you happy to wrap up?
Yeah, very happy to wrap up, and I've said most of what I wanted to say and wrap up already about urging people to take part. But I stress this is such an enormous decision. These sorts of decisions, you're setting in place something that will probably last the best part of 50 years or more. It can't be unbundled easily. So if we make a decision and get it wrong, we're stuck with that.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Cool. Thanks for joining us.